Welcome to the People Are People podcast, life lessons learned in real time, where we touch on the crazy realities of dealing with human behavior in the workplace. In 2022, I am presenting a series that I simply call the New Manager Series, where we talk about and will focus on a variety of topics every manager needs to know to be successful during and beyond their first year of management. Being a manager is not always a pretty job. It comes with highs and lows that you must prepare yourself to navigate. In this episode, we are going to be talking about why performance metrics matter. In our past podcast episodes, we've talked a lot about how managers and organizations use metrics to set corporate-wide type of goals, as it relates to specific benchmarks they're going to be working towards for the year. We've also talked a little bit about how you as a manager can use metrics to evaluate performance. But I do want us to focus on three core questions during this episode. First, should you monitor metrics? What metrics should you monitor if you elect to do so? And how can you use the information that you obtain from those metrics? So let's dive into the first question. Should you monitor metrics? And my short answer is going to be yes, absolutely. And make sure that you're also establishing their purpose and meaning. Now, I add that last caveat, meaning you don't want to just find yourself bean counting to bean count, and because it can weigh you down, a little bit. It could be unnecessary bean counting. You want to make sure that if you are going to be doing some bean counting initially, that you focus on specifically, what it is your team does. I know that there are some executives who will kind of make you feel a way about your approach to bean counting, as they say, but I highly encourage you to do it as a new manager because it helps you to get a sense of the everyday workload of the employees on your team. It helps you to see, it can help you to establish some benchmarks internally. Like, for example, if you would expect your team to produce X number of widgets every day, what is the actual widget production count? Who are the individuals who are meeting or exceeding that benchmark, and who are the individuals who are maybe falling behind that benchmark, and what's causing that? Is it a gap in training? Is it a gap in equipment? Is it a gap in performance with understanding processes? These are ways that you can use bean counting to really hone in on, again, the work it is your team does and how productive they are or should be. Additionally, it is one of the most important proactive actions you can take as a manager. Again, executives will poo-poo on your bean counting, but for you as someone who may be new coming into the organization, or maybe you've been promoted into your position, you may not have had a true sense of how hard everyone was working on the team. Maybe you thought you were the hardest worker, but it turns out there's 3 other people on the team now who exceed, your productivity levels. And it's a real opportunity to identify, okay, well, how do we raise everyone else up to that level as well? Now, you may be wondering, well, what exactly should I monitor? I'm stepping into this position and I'm still learning my role. Okay, yes, I'm going to do a little bean counting to get a sense of what it is my team does, but what is it that I can monitor specifically? So yes, we've talked about productivity and bean counting. I've justified why this is important because I think it's going to be essential for you understanding what it is your team does. Trending data is another reason to do this. If you're looking to establish or forecast how busy your team is at certain points in the year, it's a great way to start establishing that foundation. If you end up being the manager of that team for a stretch of time, it helps you to determine whether or not, again, you're adequately staffed, if you're following the best processes, are there any efficiency gaps that you need to address? It's just a great tool for doing that. Your staffing, based on the productivity that your team is exhibiting, do you have enough people or do you need to request more? Or again, do you need to look at your processes? Additionally, you want to monitor the quality of work that your team is doing. You may have to create some audits to do that, or ideally you want to use anything that already exists. I highly encourage you not to create your own templates unless you find that there is a gap in the existing templates, or maybe you only need to monitor something specifically for a period and therefore you're going to create your own template to do that. Definitely use what's already out there to identify, again, what are the best practices? What are people doing well on your team? Where are there some teachable moments that you need to address before the broader organization figures out that your team is doing something incorrectly? You can use quality of work audits to identify, again, ambiguity or gaps in processes or policies that you may have in place. And you can also use it to identify opportunities for new initiatives, new programs. It's a great way for you to identify ways to be creative in your approach to, how you're managing your team, a way to be proactive, to initiate new programs. Again, anything that you can do to help improve the efficiency, in which your team operates or the customers they serve. You can definitely identify those opportunities with quality audits. Additionally, you can use your metrics to identify how well you're actually lining up with corporate goals. Now, corporate goals, those could be things that have been, or goals that have been established, for the year, or it could just be a general overview of goals that are in relation to the company's vision or mission. But that's a way that you can use your metrics to evaluate, hey, are we actually doing tasks that line up with the company's vision or mission, or are we off from that? Are we doing the things that, my leader has set forth for me for this new year? Am I actually, or is the team actually carrying out what it is they need to do? And so again, use your metrics to monitor for that. Now, how can you use these metrics? Well, I've kind of touched on some of this as I talked about what it is you should monitor, but you want to use these metrics proactively as you look at your staffing models and justifying the positions that you have. Now, keep in mind that you may come into the company at a time when everything is great. The company is exceeding the expectations. Maybe they're out there rocking it on Wall Street and everything is just utopia. And then 2 years from the time you start in your position, you suddenly may find yourself in the midst of hey, we've got to save $1 million. And do you really need these positions argument? And so your metrics often can help to serve as a way for you to provide a educated, informed, and useful bit of feedback to your leader as to what it is you think should be the next steps. Now, listen, at the end of the day, it is highly plausible that your metrics may not spare you from having to lose positions, to support, $1 million savings plans that sometimes come up. But it can definitely help maybe to minimize the number of positions you have to give up from your team. So it's a great way to, again, justify the positions you have. A great way if your company just continues to fly high to, justify adding additional positions. That's one way that you can use the metrics. Another way you can use metrics is to tell the story about the work you do and what it is you do well. I think sometimes you as the mid-level leader, you're very close to the work that's happening. So you are very informed with or about what it is your team is doing and all the great things that they do for the customers they serve, whether those customers are internal customers or whether they are external customers. There are times when you likely are asking your team to take on the job of 5 people, right? And no one ever complains. So how do you then tell that story to your leader so that, your team receives the recognition they deserve? One of the ways that you can do that is with your metrics. You can show them the volume of work that your team has produced over, the last couple of months, quality, right? If they've done it well and accurately, that's additional information that you can share. If you get the challenge of so what, again, sometimes when you're telling the story anecdotally and you may not have the metrics to support you, your leader may challenge you with a so what statement, which we all know is very frustrating, right? Because it's like on some levels, it's demeaning and demoralizing of, motivation for how well you're able to kind of proceed with your team, right? Because again, only oftentimes how hard your team is working. But if you get the so what, your metrics are a great way to then back up your story, right? It's no longer anecdotal and it gives meaning, it adds substance to your conversation with your leader. It's also a great way metrics can be a great way to forecast for the upcoming year or the next, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. It's a great way to forecast, again, what the demand may be for your team. And how does that then compare with what is coming? Do you have the right resources to meet the demands that are heading your way? Do you need to ask for some additional resources, temporary resources, new software, new equipment? Your metrics can definitely help you, again, create the story, justify exactly all the things you might want to ask your leader for, in proceeding forward to continue doing great work. Additionally, as I identified, you can use the metrics to identify new opportunities for your team. There are some times or some instances where you might identify the opportunity to roll out a new service line or a new service. Maybe you're being asked to take on some additional work for your team. And so you can use our metrics to identify whether or not that's feasible. And if it is feasible, for how long? Is it permanently feasible or will it only be feasible for the next 90 days? So your metrics are just kind of a great way to be able to have an educated conversation, make educated decisions to, support the business and the work that you and your team are going to be doing. So in simple terms, do you need performance metrics or do you need metrics at all? Absolutely. You need metrics to know about, again, performance, productivity, and the quality of the work you're doing. You need the information to identify new opportunities and whether or not you can take on new work. It's a great way to identify trends that are happening within your team, and it can be an excellent way for you to tell a story and to be able to tell a story on the fly without having to think too hard, because you will pretty much know the ins and outs of your team if you have those metrics handy and ready to go. So today's episode is a short one, but I wanted to just really dive in and talk a little bit about the importance of metrics and why they matter. If you liked this episode, please take the time to like the podcast, share the podcast. As I say, I am a small podcaster in a mighty sea ocean of bigger podcasters. So anything that you can do to spread the love, share the information, I greatly appreciate it. So stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next episode.